Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We'll give it just a minute or so to let some folks come into the room, and then we'll get started. All right, I see the numbers are ticking up and maybe it's evening out a little bit. So I think maybe we'll go ahead and get started. And we are recording this, just so you all know, and we will share out the recording afterwards. So if you missed the first few minutes, don't worry too much about that. So welcome. My name is Sara Dart. I'm the Senior Vice President for Education in Ireland, based in Boston, Massachusetts. Although today I'm coming to you from glorious Springfield, Massachusetts. We're very happy to have so many of you joining us today to learn a bit more about options for your students in Ireland, what you should know in advising them, what the differences are between advising for the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, just sort of all the bits and pieces that will be helpful in figuring out which student might be a good fit for which institution. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to our wonderful panelists representing some of our fantastic universities. Oh, sorry, one more thing to mention is that some of our colleagues from other universities are also here and in the chat. So if you pop questions into the chat about other institutions, folks from those institutions, if they're here, will answer them. And if not, I'll make sure to pass them on, the questions on to those folks. We are talking generally about Ireland, the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland today, and not specifically about any particular universities. So with that, over to Jim.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Sara, and welcome everyone. My name is Jim Pierson. I work with University College Dublin. I'm based in Chicago, and I've been with UCD for about 11 years now, helping students from North America. Maggie?
Hi, everybody. My name is Maggie Cardosi. I work for University College Cork. I'm the regional manager for North America, and I am based in Buffalo, New York.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maddie Reeves. I am the International Officer in North America for Queen's University Belfast, and I am based in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Awesome. So Phil, to everybody, welcome. As Sara said, we're very excited that you're here to join us to learn a little bit more about advising for the Republic of Ireland and Northern Irish universities. Just a couple of quick housekeeping pieces of information before we get moving. So first of all, the information that we're going to go over today is intended as a general guide for non-EU applicants. So that's going to be students applying as non-EU students to our universities. There is a separate process for students who would be EU, and while we're happy to provide more resources for that, we are just going to be going over the non-EU process today. So also just want to note that every institution is going to have kind of varying policies and deadlines, timelines around application processes, entry requirements, fees, and other things. So just keep that in mind. And if you have specific questions, please be sure to contact each institution directly for more specific information about that university. Also, just to note, as Sara said, we have a Q&A going. Please feel free to put any questions into the Q&A. We have some of our wonderful colleagues there to help answer questions in the Q&A when possible, but we'll also leave plenty of time to answer questions live at the end of the presentation. So sit tight, and here we go. So first off, I think it's telling that all of you are here because obviously you're interested in learning a little bit more about what applying to universities across the island of Ireland looks like. But the couple of things that you may want to be aware of as you're advising students as to why choosing Ireland as an educational destination would be a great choice. First of all, Ireland is a small, friendly country right on the western periphery of Europe. It's currently the only English-speaking country in the EU. So it enjoys a really unique perspective on kind of EU and international politics and business. And for such a small country, we do really punch above our weight when it comes to the quality of our education system. Our universities are ranked in the top 1 to 2% worldwide, and there really is something for everybody when it comes to our institutions. So we have hundreds of unique programs offered in very diverse university settings, whether you're looking for a large suburban state university style educational setting, or a small college town setting, a medieval university setting, or something in between. You name it, we probably have it on the island of Ireland. Our educational system also emphasizes practical learning. So many of the programs that your students will be applying to will likely include work placements or field work or study abroad opportunities built into those programs. And because our graduates are so highly educated, they do tend to be very highly sought after as well. So most of our universities boast employment rates in the mid to high 90s and above. And speaking of employability, we have a post-study work visa for the Republic of Ireland for up to 12 months after you complete a bachelor's degree and 24 months after completing a master's degree. And then for universities or students who choose to study in Northern Ireland or the UK, these post-study work visas are for 18 months after completing either a bachelor's or a master's degree. It's also worth knowing, I mentioned that Ireland is kind of a hub for international business as well. We are home to over 1,000 leading multinational companies who see our university graduates as highly sought after future employees. So your students could potentially become part of the workforce in places like Google, HP, Apple, IBM, Facebook, Pepsi, and a few others, just to name a few. But also just to know, we are a hub for a lot of different industries, including ICT, gaming, pharmaceuticals, financial services, medical devices, and diagnostic companies as well. And when it comes to our universities, I mentioned earlier that we have very specialized and practical learning based degree programs. But just to go over a few more items kind of around what our educational system looks like. First off, we do not have general education requirements. So for the most part, our programs are direct entry and students can jump directly into their chosen subjects. So that means that students who are particular interest and who are particularly interested in a subject area can go right in and not have to, waste up to 2 years doing general education requirements. And again, we really have something for everybody. So everything from archaeology to zoology and everything in between. And these programs would be internationally recognized as well. So students can go anywhere in the world with their degree once they finish up with us. We also offer many professional programs at the direct entry level as well. So things like law, medicine, veterinary medicine, dentistry, physiotherapy, which would usually be considered postgraduate programs here in the United States. Students can enter into at the undergraduate level and received a very specialized degree that they're able to potentially transfer certainly back to the United States or anywhere into the world. The majority of our programs are 3 or 4 year direct entry bachelor's degree programs, and then also master's degrees would typically be 1 calendar year in length. So students outside of going directly into their chosen field can also save some time. And then with all of this, the academic experience that we offer at Irish University tends to mean a more independent approach, less busy work, and with more focus on self-discipline and opportunities for practical experiences.
Wonderful. Thanks, Maggie. We're going to jump into some more of the itty-bitty details of the application process and how you enter into an Irish university now. So we'll talk a little bit about the different entry requirements and what the process is for creating an application. And Maddie at Queen's Belfast and I will kind of ping pong back and forth because as we're one beautiful island, there are 2 different systems in place. So there's the difference between Ireland and Northern Ireland with this. So we'll help complement each other there. Entry requirements is a difficult thing to talk about in general because it will be very different at every university, and then it's also different by course. So because students are applying to a specific course instead of to a university as a whole, what you need to get in or be considered competitive will be very different even within a university when you're looking at different majors or programs. Generally, we're looking for strong students in most of our programs. We'll look for good GPAs. Most universities will consider unweighted cumulative GPAs, though every institution might be a little bit different on what exactly they're looking for, but you can see a range from 3.0 to 3.7 is a huge range. There's a lot contained within that, or an IB equivalent of 26 to 39 points, but all of that is dependent on the program. I think the benefit of Irish universities is they tend to be very transparent and explicit in their requirements. So when you talk to a university rep or you go onto a website, it's usually very easy to see what you need to be competitive for a specific course and what entry requirements there are. So that's usually well illuminated at each institution, but hard to talk about in general terms in one webinar. Other requirements within the entry requirements theme are letters of recommendation, personal statements, or portfolios, depending on the program a student's going into. I think the harder conversation to have is test flexible admission. Again, this is very dependent on institution and program, but I think for most institutions in Ireland, there will be some kind of test flexibility and that there will be some programs or some majors that don't require ACT, SAT, or AP scores for entry. Students can be considered just based on their US high school diploma and GPA, though that will vary a bit uni to uni. And each program has, or each university has their own specific process and requirements and expectations. So it's definitely something that's worth reaching out, usually a little bit earlier than you might consider reaching out to universities asking for information or looking for help in understanding entry requirements because it is a different system with different expectations. So reaching out and, later in junior year instead of fall of senior year might be a good idea for the typical student. To try and give you a better idea, Maggie and I have laid out some basic entry requirements and kind of broad themes of what we're expecting at our institutions for different kinds of programs. I think you'll generally see a lot of arts and humanities courses are much more accessible at Irish institutions. So you'll see UCD requires just a 3.2 GPA out of 4, unweighted, or an IB 24 to be considered for many of our arts and humanities courses. Some of our social science courses like politics or sociology, archaeology can be a bit more competitive, looking for a 3.33 plus an SAT or ACT, where science and engineering would be much more competitive with a 3.5, an ACT, SAT, and an AP score. And then psychology is something we highlight specifically here because psychology in Ireland tends to be one of the most competitive courses, where I think most students understand psychology in the US as almost like an undecided social science major. It's like, I know I want to go into the social sciences. I don't know exactly what I want to do. I'll go into psychology and figure that out later. Psychology tends to be a much more competitive course with much higher entry requirements in Ireland because of its clinical nature and its preparation to go on to master's programs and go on to practice. So it's not something that you typically apply to on a whim and hope to get into. It is much more competitive. I think, and you can see some of the courses here will have additional maths or lab science requirements, and all that will be detailed on the entry requirements page that we have on our website. So this is sort of a broad idea. If you're thinking about a student that you're working with and wondering if they might be a good fit, there are more detailed overviews of requirements on our websites, but this is a good idea of where we might fall and what we might be looking for different kinds of programs within the Irish systems.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. So heading up to the north in Northern Ireland, as Jim mentioned, we are on one island altogether, but we do have two kind of separate systems. So in Northern Ireland, your students would fall under the United Kingdom's higher education system. Very similar, I would say, generally speaking, but there are a couple small differences that we'll jump into here. On average, we're looking for about a 3.2 to 3.5 cumulative GPA, plus a combination of 3 higher level grades or test scores. Each course or program that a student applies to will have individual entry requirements. So it's really important that they're doing their research ahead of time to make sure that they are qualified to receive an offer. Again, as Jim mentioned, I think it's very important to be proactive. And if you have a student who is interested in potentially studying in the Republic of Ireland or Northern Ireland, that they do their research early on, reach out to us as representatives if they have any questions, just to make sure that they are taking the right classes in their junior and senior year that will qualify for them for an offer. We look for one letter of recommendation. Typically, that's going to come from you, the counselors. However, we're happy to have you get input from a teacher who, let's say the student's applying to a biology program. If you want to get input from their biology teacher to kind of speak to their academic ability in that subject area, you're welcome to include that in your letter. We also have test flexible admissions. Some programs we do want to see AP or IB test scores in that subject specific area. So again, it's really up to you and the student to kind of make sure that they're taking the right classes and receiving the right test scores for admission. And then we do have a personal statement as well. It is short and sweet compared to what students are kind of doing and working on over here in the US. So it has a 4,000 character limit, and we are simply asking, why are you interested in this program? What have you done academically and outside of academics to prepare yourself to be successful in the program? Next slide, please. So this is just a quick little admissions breakdown or example. So I mentioned that applicants are required, in addition to having a certain GPA level, to provide a combination of 3 A-level equivalent grades or test scores. So A levels are what students in the UK take, and that's what they are kind of assessed on for admission into university. Obviously, we don't offer that here. So each school in the UK, including Queen's and Ulster, have different kind of translations, if you will, of what they will count as A levels. So for us, we would take AP test scores, honors grades from honors classes, dual enrollment grades from dual enrollment classes, SAT or ACT test scores, or IB higher level subject test scores. So any kind of combination of those 3 things. However, just again, making sure that if they need a subject specific test score or grade, that they have that to provide as well. So yeah, that's just kind of a breakdown here. You can see for politics at Queen's, we would ask for ABB. So we would want to see 1 grade or test score from this A column and then 2 from the B column at minimum for them to be eligible for an offer with us.
Great. Thanks, Maddie. So we'll go back to the Ireland application process now that you've considered maybe what student might be a good fit for coming to Ireland and want to help them get ready for the application process when they're in their final year of study. It is a bit disparate across Ireland because there isn't one common application system for the Irish universities. Each institution will have its own process, its own requirements, its own deadlines. But generally, most applications will open in the fall of the year before a student wants to start at our institutions. Typically, they may close in late May or early June. I think Irish institutions have a lot of flexibility in accepting North American students into courses late in the summer if students change their mind last minute or looking for other options. So there may be a little bit more flexibility in accepting late applications, but we obviously encourage students to apply as early as possible. For most institutions, you apply directly online to their individual application. There are a handful of Irish institutions that are on the Common App, which can make it very easy for students to apply if they're already using the Common App for other applications, though most students will apply on direct apps. The kind of exclusion to that is medicine and dentistry. So those specific courses have a separate application process. We encourage students to apply via Atlantic Bridge, which is a partner organization in North America that helps Canadian and US students apply to medicine and dentistry programs across Ireland. So it's a great opportunity for students that are pursuing those professional courses to apply to multiple universities with one application. It makes it a little bit simpler for them. Generally, applications are rolling, so you'll see the opportunity to return decisions earlier, so usually around 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the course that they're applying to. The one caveat to all of this is that Ireland has separate processes and separate fees for students that are applying as Irish, EU, or UK fee eligible students. I think there's usually a lot of confusion around this. Generally, Ireland looks for both residency and citizenship to qualify for EU fees and then apply as an EU student. So you can't assume just because a student has an Irish or an UK or an EU passport that they'll get home country fees or EU fees. Typically, they have to have citizenship and have lived for 3 of the 5 years before they start their program within the EU, or have done 5 years of primary or secondary education there. It is complicated. There's a lot of students that fall within kind of the cracks or edge cases in that scenario. So students that may be eligible for EU fees or think that they might be, have lived in the EU for a bit of their lives, they should reach out to the institution they're looking for. We all have EU fee assessments that they'll go through to confirm their application status. because the fee status that a student holds, whether they're EU or non-EU, determines the way they apply to Irish universities. So if they're EU fee eligible, they apply through the CAO, the Common Application or the Central Application Office that all Irish and EU students use to apply, whereas if they're non-EU, they apply through our direct application process. So that's all a very complicated idea, but the kind of main point is that if you have a question about a student's fee eligibility, they should reach out as soon as possible to confirm their fee eligibility so we can provide them advice so they know which application pathway to take and what to expect.
So over to Northern Ireland and our application process, we are going to be a little bit different in terms of timeline and platforms. So our applications typically open in early September, and our equal consideration deadline happens typically in mid to late January. The dates will change each year. We are on the UCAS system, so that equal consideration deadline applies to all institutions in the United Kingdom, not just those in Northern Ireland. And our open program applications typically close at the very latest, the 30th of June. So for those programs that still have open seats, we will take those rolling applications all the way through the end of June. Again, I mentioned that applications will happen on UCAS. You can apply directly online if you know you're only applying to one institution in the UK. But if you are applying to more than one, do your applications via UCAS. The caveat to those deadlines that we spoke on would be any of the professional programs listed here. So medicine, dentistry, or veterinary science. Applications must go in by October 15th if you're interested in studying in any of those courses. And those will have to go in via UCAS, even if you're just applying to one school. I could talk about UCAS for hours and hours. There's a lot to dive into on UCAS, but unfortunately, we just don't have the time today. So this lovely QR code down at the corner, and you'll get a copy of these slides later if you don't have time to scan now, has a nice 30-minute UCAS 101 crash course for you if you want to check that out. It's a great resource. You will see me make an appearance there as well. But it's a good resource and kind of a good overview of UCAS and how that works if you do have students interested in applying to schools in Northern Ireland. For our schools, we typically take 3 to 5 weeks, I would say, for admissions decisions to come out. We do usually take them on a rolling basis. However, some programs may hold on to those applications and start making decisions and sending out those decisions after that equal consideration deadline in January. So as Jim mentioned with the citizenship kind of issue or topic, if you have Irish or UK citizenship, this may or may not affect your application. This won't affect your application because it'll all go through UCAS. However, it may affect your fee status. However, it does not automatically confirm that you'll get domestic UK fee status. So families who have lived and paid taxes in the UK for the last 3 years at the time of submitting an application may qualify for domestic fee status. If you think that's you or your student thinks that's themselves, then have them reach out to us and we can do a fee assessment as well. The one thing to note is that if your students possess a valid Irish or UK passport, you will not be required to get a UK student visa. You'll just be able to come right on over because you hold that passport. Either passport will work in Northern Ireland. So that will save them several $100s, which is a nice little perk. So.
Wonderful. And then I know there's a lot of questions around applications, and there for every individual student, there might be, many different rabbit holes we could dive into with questions in individual cases. But these are some of the most common questions that we've gotten around applications, and hoping we can help answer some of the most common issues that arise. I think one thing that comes up quite frequently are dual enrollment credits in classes because they are becoming more and more popular across, especially the US. I think if they're considered, they may be considered for admissions and then for scholarship consideration. I think a lot of universities will consider dual enrollment credits similar to or equal to an AP score. So for example, UCD requires students to have an AP calculus or AP statistics score of 3 to go into engineering, but we will also accept a third level college or university maths class as equal to that. So I think they are helpful for students. I think a difficult part with dual enrollment is that transferring credit from North America to Ireland can be much more difficult. Part of that is because we don't have general education requirements, that if a student has done a few gen eds at a community college, say, they may not transfer because there's not equivalent requirements for them to transfer into. But it's worth students making the universities aware that they have these grades and these credits so that we can help advise them on what to do. Related to that, are AP scores required? I'd say for some, but not all courses, for some, but not all institutions. So it does vary, again, quite a bit, but I think generally there are quite a few opportunities for students to enter into courses in Ireland without any AP scores. There are a lot of flexibility. If your school doesn't offer an AP curriculum, there still are opportunities to enter without needing AP classes, but students may need, say, other academic experience or credentials, such as college credits or using other exams, having strong SAT, ACT scores, or even just doing additional or higher level classes in their like college level classes in their high school. I think for Canadian students, generally, there wouldn't be a requirement for any standardized test scores. We would accept their high school GPA from their province, but that'll vary a bit by each institution as to what we're looking for. Another question, especially this time of year, is do supporting materials need to be received by application deadlines? I think that'll vary again a bit by institution, but typically there's some flexibility in receiving supporting materials after the deadline. Many deadlines are strong recommendations or are there to help students know when to apply to be eligible for scholarships or for certain courses, but there'd be flexibility to add supplemental materials after the deadline has passed. Something that comes up quite often in North America is confusion around what a conditional offer is and how that impacts students. And I know students, tend to have a hard time with conditional offers because there's that lack of certainty. But in some cases where a student doesn't meet the requirements for a course yet, but may meet them with their final grades or a future test score, they may get an offer conditional on meeting specific requirements. It's usually spelled out very plainly and clearly what they need to do to meet those requirements. Many students know they will easily meet those requirements, but in some cases it might be an unknown, such as needing a specific AP score that you won't have confirmed until July before term starts. So it can be difficult. We certainly encourage students and counselors to reach out to us with questions around what offer conditions mean or what opportunities might exist if a student doesn't meet their offer conditions. And then one of the basic questions that comes up all the time that we've spoken about a bit already is, do students need to know what they want to study? Typically, yes, because you're applying to a specific course, because there's not a lot of flexibility to change your course while you're a student, you usually need to know exactly what you want to study. There are some institutions that have more flexible programs or flexibility for specific majors within certain areas, such as within the sciences. You might be able to switch around in different areas, but typically students should have a pretty strong idea of where they want to study before they start their application so they can apply to the correct course so they can get started in the right area. And then, are there foreign language requirements? Generally, no. We wouldn't require any foreign languages unless a student wants to study a language at university level. So if a student wants to study French, they typically have to have strong French skills already. But otherwise, there's no foreign language requirements because it is a very focused degree program in Ireland, so you don't need to have kind of the general education background US universities require. Something separate is that Irish language knowledge is not required, but is welcome for students coming to Ireland. So we definitely welcome students that have a little bit of Irish knowledge or want to learn some, but programs are taught in English and students don't need to have a background in Irish to come into the courses. And then there's also the benefit for counselors and for students that there are 7 Irish universities that have full-time regional reps that are based in North America. So there's people like Maddie, Maggie, and myself that are based here full-time, and we work a lot with a partner organization called EIRNA. There's a link there, or you can look up EIRNA, the Association of International Regional Reps, and there's links out to all the different universities that are part, so you can find those regional reps that might be close to you.
And so we'll talk about the fun stuff now, which is money and cost. We wanted to highlight, of course, that everywhere you go, it will cost a little bit different, but we took kind of the average sums or ranges for all of our universities on the island of Ireland here for purposes today. But the average cost overall of one academic year, that would include tuition and living expenses, can range from 40 to 50,000 US or 55 to 70,000 Canadian. And that'll be for non-medical programs. For medical programs, costs are going to be a little bit higher. So anywhere around 80,000 US or 115,000 Canadian. However, they are a bit more streamlined, so you're spending less in terms of the amount of years that you are actually enrolled in school and paying tuition. So something to kind of consider there for medicine, at least. Again, tuition and living costs will vary depending on program and location, but looking at these numbers, if you have students who are already considering studying out of state or at private universities, these are pretty on par, if not less than a lot of the costs that they might be looking at currently. So definitely something to keep in mind. I think it's a big misconception that going abroad means you're going to spend a lot more money on your degree and your time and cost of living. Ireland is a very affordable place to come and study and be a student. You will have the opportunity, if you've got that bandwidth and time, to work part-time as well while you're over there. So up to 20 hours per week during term, so when classes are actively in session, and up to 40 hours per week during longer breaks, such as the winter and summer breaks. These are great opportunities if students want to stay to do full-time internships, really get some good field experience and make some good money while they're doing it as well. All of our scholarship, or I'm sorry, most of our universities will also offer scholarships. So these will be partial tuition scholarships, typically based on academic merit. And some may also offer more substantial awards that will require separate applications. I always say it's important to do your research ahead of time with those separate application scholarships, just because they will all have different timelines. Even some awards within the same institution will have different timelines. So try to have your students do their research early on in the fall or over their winter break to identify which scholarships they qualify for, what the application opening deadline date is, and what the application deadline is, just so that they can kind of come up with a game plan or a roadmap for when they're going to apply to make sure that they can maximize their chances to get scholarships to help support their studies. Most of our institutions also accept FAFSA loans to pay for tuition and living expenses. So just because we are not in the US does not mean students can't apply for FAFSA loans and use those with our institutions, which is great news. The one thing that we couldn't take from the FAFSA awards would be Pell Grants. So any kind of grants, those do have to stay at institutions that are on US soil. But outside of that, we can take those loans. So that's another way that a lot of our students coming from the US specifically will help fund their studies in Ireland. So living in Ireland, cost of living more specifically, it will vary again, depending on location. So if you're in a bigger city, you'll probably pay and have a bigger price tag on your cost of living. But if you're in a smaller town or village, then, you could find some really affordable housing as well as just cost of living in terms of daily costs that you're kind of dealing with. We typically recommend to budget at least 1,500 US per month to account for rent, food, travel, and entertainment. And I think generally speaking, for most locations over here in North America, that is a very affordable price tag for what the cost of living is here. So hopefully that is good news for your students as they're kind of making their budgets in their head for the places that they're looking at applying to. Housing, we all offer accommodation in purpose-built student apartments, and this is guaranteed for all of our first-year international students. So your students will have a place to live and a nice soft landing place to come to when they arrived in Ireland in their fall semester. These housing and accommodation buildings and spaces have more than just rooms and spaces for them to sleep and study, but there are a lot of social programs that are built into the housing and residence life programs that the institutions offer. And it's really great to kind of create a space of belonging for students as well, so that when they come over, they have people and familiar faces right off the bat that they can go to, and then friends that they can make. In terms of food on the island of Ireland, it's quite lovely. It's very fresh, locally sourced produce, meat, and dairy, and it's quite affordable as well. So you really are kind of connected to the regions that you're in and the land that you're living on, which I think is wonderful. It's a very healthy lifestyle over there, very sustainable as well in terms of the food offerings, but also on campus, a lot of our campuses are really pivoting toward leaning into sustainability initiatives as much as we can. So implementing plastic-free policies and other measures to ensure the health of our planet for many years and generations to come. Going back a little bit in terms of transportation, it's quite easy to get around the island of Ireland. So lots of opportunities for you to get out and explore in your free time as a student. You can travel via bus or rail, and we are very well connected to Europe and other destinations around the world via airports in Dublin, Shannon, Cork, and Belfast. So you're never more than a few hours away from an airport, typically less than an hour for most students. So student life in Ireland is not too dissimilar to what it would be over in North America at an institution. You have the opportunity to get involved with a lot as a student at a school on the island of Ireland. So we have lots of sports clubs that you can join. You can go and play up to a competitive level if you'd like, or you can just do walk-on intramural sports clubs, whether you're, it's a sport you've already played back here, or it's something you want to keep up with when you're over and something you want to keep up with when you're over there, or if it's something you want to try, something new. There's something for everyone in terms of sporting opportunities. There are also societies. So societies are going to kind of be anything outside of sports. The sports are the clubs. Societies are academic groups, hobby-related groups, different kind of special interest groups that students can join to kind of meet other students who have similar interests or like-minded to themselves. And it's a great way, again, to kind of get out of your course group, so your kind of cohort that you're with, out of that bubble and meet other people on campus who are in programs totally different to your students. You can also make your voice heard on campus by running for a position on student government or in the students' union. So that's a great way to stay involved and kind of have your student make change at the institution that they're at while they're there. And then, of course, a lot of our students will also take advantage of the location of Ireland and the affordability of being able to explore the island, but also beyond the island over in the UK or continental Europe as well. It's very easy, very affordable to get flights to other countries and kind of take advantage of those long weekends or breaks that you have while you're over there, and get to see some new things. So another important area to highlight, we want to make sure that our students are supported academically. We want them to be academically successful, but also holistically, so that, they come out feeling fully supported both in and out of the classroom in terms of their lives. So we have a lot of different support systems, representatives and offices on all of our campuses. Each of our campuses will have a global office, and staff members are there full-time to support international students, not only through the application process and kind of the college search process, but also in transitioning over to campus life in Ireland as well. So we're all part of our global offices. We just happen to be located over here in the US, but there are, again, as I mentioned, full-time staff members who are there on campus all the time to help support our students too once they get to campus. We also offer academic and peer advisors at all of our institutions. So this is a great way for students to access a network of peer supports at their institution and within their program. Some schools will have kind of like tutor or mentor buddy pairings. So maybe an older student in a program is paired with a first-year student, and they're kind of there as a resource as needed. And also just kind of a mentor or a guide who has kind of walked through the student's shoe or walked in their shoes already. We also have academic advisors who are there to support with program-related questions throughout your students' time with us on campus. All of our schools will offer things called skills labs. So these are going to be labs or offices where students can receive extra guidance or support around things like writing, math, time management, and more. So it's a great tool to utilize while they're there, completely, free for them to use and engage with as much or as little as they see needed. We also have disability supports on all of our campuses. So we'll have a dedicated disability support office. The one thing to note is that it is vital for students to self-identify early on in the process, after they've received their offer, to ensure that their unique needs can be met once they come to campus. We're happy to hop on calls with you, answer any questions that you have, and just kind of get it sorted out to make a plan for your student to make sure that they're successful once they get over to campus. Health and wellness is another area that we make sure our students are supported in. So we have campus health centers, mental health counseling services, and Irish universities also offer a number of resources to ensure students' well-being outside of that, whether it's well-being rooms, drop-in sessions for academic support, financial services, things like that. So definitely not lacking in that area at all, and something that our students often take advantage of. Finally, we know that going to uni, the end goal is kind of to graduate and start a career. So we do have dedicated career services offices, and those will hold, semesterly job fairs, resume workshops, mock interview workshops, and more to prepare students for kind of life after university and those next steps in their professional careers.
Wonderful. And then this last slide here is for all of you joining us on this call. I'm sure you'd love to visit Ireland and see these campuses that we represent in person. And as we tell students all the time, there's nothing like seeing something for yourself instead of learning about it digitally. We do have opportunities for you to come visit. The most well-known one is the Education in Ireland Counselor Tour. This tour happens every February with opportunities to visit multiple campuses in Ireland and Northern Ireland. It's a great opportunity. It's a whirlwind trip where you are working every day and learning about institutions and traveling around and crisscrossing the island, but it's an incredible opportunity to spend time with colleagues and to learn directly from institutions what they have to offer your students. Applications typically open in September. They're closed for February 2026 if coming up soon was on your mind, but the applications typically open sometime around the NACAC National Conference in the fall, and there's usually great promotion then and around September and October. So look forward to applications next year for the February 2027 Counselor Tour. And if your travels take you to Ireland, if you're doing a family vacation, if you're on a trip to another institution and want to stop over in Ireland on your way home or your way there, please reach out to us or any rep from an Irish institution. We'd always be very happy to meet with our counselors that are in the area and be able to show you around our campuses and give you a tour to be able to see what we offer for your students. So thanks very much to everyone for joining us. I know this is an incredibly busy time of year, so we really appreciate you spending an hour of your day with us and learning more about Ireland and what we have to offer to you and your students. This is a great opportunity for us to connect with our counselor colleagues that are working with students all the time. If you have students that you know are an excellent fit for going to Ireland or that are already considering going abroad for their degree, we're hosting another webinar tonight that's meant for students and families to learn more about the application process and what it's like to be a student in Ireland. So Sara is going to share the link to that. It's tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Mountain, and 4 o'clock Pacific. So there's great opportunities for your students to connect with us as well. And thanks again for coming. We will have a recording of this and the presentation shared with you in a few days after we get this all downloaded and sorted. But for now, there are a ton of great questions in the Q&A, and we'll jump in to some of those and help answer those questions. So the first one that I saw that jumped out at me is the EU fee assessment and EU fee eligibility. There's actually a couple questions related to that. We did answer that in our slides and talked a bit about fee eligibility for EU students or UK home fees eligibility. It is a complicated process. Generally, students need to have residency and citizenship. And someone asked about whether doing an undergrad degree would help students qualify for home or EU fees as a graduate degree. And that's definitely something that is usually a borderline case depending on a student's citizenship, how long they've studied in Ireland, and their age at time of application. So that's something where students should reach out to us and we can help guide them a little bit more. It is possible, but it's not a guarantee.
There's a great question in the chat, maybe for any of our panelists here, from Damien, asking about the type of student behaviorally, maturity-wise, who's successful at an institution in Ireland. What kind of qualities do they have? And are there particular types of schools from the US that you see successful students coming from, whether it's public, private, small, large, religious, etc.?
It's a great question. I can start, and I'm sure we all have things to contribute to that one. I think definitely students who are more independent will be successful, especially academically speaking. Our assessment methods are a bit different on the island of Ireland, both in the Republic and in Northern Ireland. Your students will not have a lot of opportunities to be assessed for points for things like attendance or posting on a discussion board, or pop quizzes, things like that. Typically, they are assessed on a handful of assignments or tests, and then that is what their final class grade rests on. So it's really up to them to do the reading and kind of digest on their own time and come with questions to tutorial sessions or to open office hours with faculty to make sure that they have a good grip on the subject matter, because there isn't, I think, as much of an opportunity to kind of gain extra assessment points as you might see over at institutions in North America.
I'll add to that 10 years ago when I started this job, the majority of our students had some kind of connection to Ireland. They were American or Canadian, but their parents were Irish, their grandparents were Irish. They went to Ireland every year for holidays and things like that. So it was an easy jump for them to go over to Ireland for their degree because they had familiarity with it. And there's been a huge change that I'm sure you've all seen in the interest and popularity of going abroad for a degree. And now the majority of the students that come to UCD have no connection to Ireland. They're a stereotypical US student that just found one of us at a college fair, learned about an opportunity from a friend, and decided to pursue something a bit different than most of their peers are doing. So I don't think you don't need to have a connection abroad. You don't need to have a support system there to still be successful and to build a community and feel at home when you come to Ireland. And I think that's a trepidation or maybe a myth that students have that they need to be some world traveler already to take this big leap. And it is a big leap of faith, but you can do it even if you've never been abroad before. So there's great opportunities for students from all kinds of backgrounds.
Yeah, and I would say too that students like Maddie said who are a little bit more independent and I guess willing to be more self-directed tend to do a little bit better, but just otherwise students who are curious and ready for an adventure and ready to really experience something that may not be the norm for their peers here in North America, just willing to embrace that adventure. And the bit of the question about how students, if we're seeing a particular student from a particular type of school do better or worse and whatnot, we welcome students from all of the different backgrounds that were mentioned, whether it's public, private, religiously affiliated, and everything in between, IB curriculum, US curriculum, Canadian curriculums. All of these students are doing well in our schools for many different reasons, and it's just kind of their own personal background and their willingness to do something a little bit different and be more self-directed that I think makes them successful.
Thanks. Maggie, you mentioned some different kinds of curriculum. There's a question in the chat about Cambridge AICE certificate courses, and do those qualify for the test/AP/IB requirements?
That I would say that would have to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. So I personally haven't evaluated those on my own before, but I know our admissions people, and I would assume this would be the same across the board at our universities, would be happy to consider it, but you'd have to contact each of us individually.
Yeah, I'd say at least for UCD in some cases for some courses, certificates or in a similar vein, IB certificates if a student didn't get a full diploma can be considered sometimes to meet subject requirements. So in place of an AP math score or an SAT math score, they may be able to use some of the certificates like a AICE or IB certificates, but it does depend by institution and by course.
We have another question here from our friend Robbie, asking about personal statements. Could you talk a little bit more about specifically what things you like to see in personal statements and whether students can use the same personal statement at multiple institutions on the island?
Yeah, this will be a very particular answer for Northern Ireland and for the UK, and so we'll get to UCAS. I guess from the very far other end of the spectrum, UCD doesn't consider personal statements at all in applications, except for our clinical courses if you apply to medicine. If you apply to politics or arts or engineering, we don't read essays, we don't look at letters of rec, we only look at academics. So it's a very different program, and where students do have to submit a personal statement for something like medicine, it should be very narrowly tailored to the institution they want to study at and the course they want to study on.
And on the other side of that, for the island of Ireland, and I'd probably preface this by saying that you're going to want to be very careful by looking at the admission requirements for each university, because UCD doesn't have a requirement for a personal statement, but UCC does. So we do want to see maximum 500-word personal statement detailing why the student is interested in studying at UCC. So that said, for the Republic of Ireland, I wouldn't recommend copy and pasting a personal statement and sending it to everybody because we're all looking potentially for something slightly different, just to double check that the student is really interested in studying on our campus. So yeah, that's just maybe something that's a little bit different about those of us in the Republic. But Maddie, you tell us a bit about how UCAS and UK works.
Yeah, so in the UK and via UCAS, you will submit one personal statement to up to 5 programs or institutions. That personal statement will be the same to every single institution that your student is applying to. So you have to make sure that it is more generic and really speaks to the course that they're applying for and why they're passionate about studying that subject area, what they've done academically in order to be successful, as well as, any other kind of areas where they maybe have volunteer experience or have done some job shadowing, things like that. It's 4,000 characters, as I mentioned earlier on, so very short and to the point. So making sure that they are really only including what's really important and relevant to the course that they're applying for will be important. So if they have, great experience as captain of the soccer team, but they can't tie that to, why that would make them successful as a politics student, then it's something that they probably shouldn't waste the characters on. Pick a different example that might be stronger. If they can tie it well to politics, then great, include it. But again, just being mindful that it is a very short amount of characters that they have available to use.
There's a great question in the chat from Sunny, who's asking if there's a place to see the ethnic and racial diversity of the different institutions and what the supports are for the LGBTQ plus population. I will start off by saying that ethnic and racial diversity are not characteristics that are specifically tracked by Irish institutions, and that is, I suppose I'm speaking for the Republic, but Maddie can jump in if I'm wrong here about the North. I think this is something that isn't particularly collected. It's just sort of not the way that Ireland does things. However, the campuses are very, very diverse places. So maybe if I can just ask the panelists to speak to the diversity of their campuses, what that looks like, and support services for LGBTQ plus populations and other groups across campus.
Sure. Yeah, I can start down south with UCC. So about 22% of our student population is from outside of Ireland, and that would encompass students from around 140 different countries, so all over the world. So very diverse kind of cohort of students who would come in to study every year, speaking a variety of languages, where English may not be their first language. So I think it's a great learning environment for both American students and Irish students to really experience quite a bit of the rest of the world while on Irish soil. And in terms of supports for the LGBTQ community on our campus, we have a very strong commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion at UCC. And all of our students are treated with the assumption that they are going to receive dignity and respect regardless of their background or how they identify. So whether that's kind of bespoke counseling services or particular student groups, our student campus community is incredibly active and incredibly supportive of the LGBTQ community. So it's there, and we actively welcome students from those backgrounds and from any background who are curious and happy to study with us.
Thanks, Maggie. From UCD's perspective, and I agree with Sara, I think Ireland has a very different history in relation to racial and ethnic diversity, so it's not something emphasized quite as strongly in statistics or in applications as you might see in the US that has a very different history. But I think it is a very diverse country and culture, and our campuses are also very diverse. Similar to UCC, we have a large number of international students, and that's where the diversity is easiest to express in numbers and statistics. So about a third of our campus, over 10,000 students, are from 152 countries outside of Ireland. So it is a diverse place with students from all different backgrounds. And I think Ireland has been a very welcoming place to students from all different areas and all different backgrounds and experiences. I think that's particularly true for students in LGBTQ community that are looking for a place that's more welcoming, and it's heartening to see that. I think UCD in particular, we've seen an increased number of trans students that have been looking to attend university abroad, finding a place that is welcoming to them and that is there to help support them. The one word of caution is that it is a difficult prospect for students that are in the middle of a transition or that have more personal health needs that need to be met, because moving abroad, trying to get health care and trying to receive continuing care can be very difficult. So that's something where students need to make a concerted effort to speak with us to help find what supports are available and how they'll be continuing to receive the care that they need while they're transitioning to a different country and a different health system. So we're certainly here to help support them, and there's great student societies on our campuses that can help do that, but it's certainly something that they need to reach out, and we would encourage them to ask us for help much earlier in the process.
I would echo what Jim and Maggie have said as well. There's really not much of a difference in terms of like reporting on student population between the Republic and the North of Ireland. For Queens specifically, about 20% of our student body is international student. So we see students coming from over 90 countries around the world. Students coming from the US and Canada will actually be in the minority of our international student population. So a lot of our students, the majority will be coming from places like China, Southeast Asia, and India. So again, as Maggie kind of said, it's a great way to engage with people and meet people from all walks of life from around the whole world, and really make relationships that you might not otherwise have had the opportunity to make. In terms of our supports for LGBTQ plus students, we are fully supportive of them in a very holistic way at Queens. So we have a lot of counseling support services in place. We have, liaisons who can help them with navigating care that they need while they're over in Northern Ireland. As Jim mentioned, they do want to definitely do their research ahead of time if any students, particular students who are transgender, do have any major medical needs or care that's regular that needs to be continued as they're coming over. So just kind of doing that research ahead of time, especially with navigating the NHS or the National Health System in the UK, and what services are available to them. But yeah, lots of student groups to get involved with. We have a very vibrant Pride Society. Belfast as well has a lot of different organizations that are there to support people in the LGBTQ plus community. So they can get involved both on campus and off campus in the city. There are lots of fun events that go on year round, lots of fun groups to get involved with, and a great community to be a part of.
I will say in general that Ireland is a very welcoming place. Something that folks tend not to know is that Ireland was the first country to legalize marriage equality by popular vote. So in general, it's a very welcoming society across the island. I'm going to pivot to a question from Kate, who's asked about what types of documentation do institutions typically require from a student with an IEP or a 504 plan in order to receive academic accommodation?
All right. I suppose I can stop sharing now so we can see each other a little bit better while we answer the rest of these. For UCD, generally, we would require documentation from a physician that they can attest to the student's specific needs and what accommodation they need to be successful at university. And then we would encourage students that once they have that documentation, they can go to our Access and Lifelong Learning office where they'd get a needs assessment where they meet with an advisor and be able to speak more directly about what they need and what their current circumstances are and what supports UCD can provide them. That's also something that students should self-identify and reach out earlier in the process than they might typically otherwise. There's, it varies by institution, but like UCD, we don't require students to disclose that information on an application, but we'd want them to tell us if they need support much earlier than maybe other students might reach out for support.
I'd say that'd be a very similar process at UCC as well. And just to echo that, the earlier that we know a student is going to need additional support academically or otherwise, that's the sooner that we can get in touch with those systems and those offices to make sure that that's in place, or that what is on offer at our universities is going to be a good fit for that student.
And I would say the same for Queens as well. So.
Very interesting question here from Deborah in the chat. How to advise students who are choosing between Irish and British universities? What are the main differences?
Uh, Well, being generous to our British colleagues at other institutions, I mean, obviously, I'm here to tell you Ireland's the best place in the world to study abroad. Britain can be okay as well. I think both offer great opportunities, and I think the academic systems are very similar because most Irish universities are founded on the British system of higher education, so there'd be very similar experiences and opportunities. I think coming from Chicago myself, most students that I talk to that are looking at the UK are looking at London, and I tend to think of Dublin to London as Chicago is to New York, and that's probably the best corollary I can make. New York and London can be large, overwhelming metropolitan cities, and if that's what a student's looking for, then that's an excellent fit for them. But if they want to go to what's a more approachable and community-based city, I think Dublin and Belfast as well kind of fit that bill as well. So I think it depends a lot. I think all that boils down to it depends on what a student is looking for. They can get great academic experiences and have similar academic opportunities, but the rest of the questions of what kind of school do you want to learn in, what kind of environment do you want to be in, do you want to go to a large school or small school, urban or rural? All those questions have to be answered abroad as well. And I think there's very different opportunities across Ireland compared to the UK.
Yeah, I would agree with Jim there for sure. I think that the systems are fairly similar overall and mirror each other in a lot of ways. And so I do think it really does come down to what program is the best fit for your student, what are they looking to get out of their time at university, and does the institution offer that for them? And then same, with location and then other amenities like student groups and student life and affordability. There's a broad range of those, kind of on those spectrums of those considerations, both in the UK and Ireland. So I think, again, it's just looking and really narrowing down and asking those nitty-gritty questions to find the best fit for you and your student.
It's also worth knowing or remembering too that for the Republic of Ireland, students don't need entry visas to come and study in the Republic of Ireland institutions. So that kind of takes away an extra step in the process. And as somebody who loves studying in Ireland so much, I did it twice, and then I found a career that lets me talk about it all the time. I would say, and I might be a bit biased, that studying in Ireland it is a great choice. It was the best choice for me, and it's a wonderful, friendly environment. And I don't think students can go wrong by choosing any place along our island to make their home for their academic studies.
We have recognize our time. We have a couple more questions in the chat. I think if the panelists are happy to stay on for a few more minutes. Awesome. And for anyone who has to take off, again, this will be recorded, so you can check out the end if you need to. There's a question in the chat about whether the number of places in medical school for international students or North American students are restricted.
For the UK, yes. So it is restricted and it's typically very competitive for international students. I know some schools offer as few as 5, 6, 7 spots a year for anyone coming outside of the United Kingdom. So just kind of keep that in mind for your students who are looking at Northern Ireland or the UK. But I'll pass it to my friends in the Republic.
There's not one set capacity for international students into medicine or clinical courses in Ireland. Each institution will set their own capacity for each course, medicine and other courses included. That being said, it's medicine and it's just as competitive as applying to med school in the US. So students should expect that even with incredible grades and great experiences, they still may not get an offer into any of the medicine programs because it is just that competitive. But there are opportunities for students that are very strong.
Yes, and this question was actually in the chat, Sarah. I answered it kind of in the chat, but just to kind of talk a little bit or just make a note about kind of licensing and how that transfers back. We mentioned that we work with a partner called Atlantic Bridge for all medical school applications for the Republic of Ireland. They have some really great resources there about transferring back to Canada and the United States and how those transitions look and how seamless usually they are. So I definitely recommend checking out that website and going through there. They have some really comprehensive information if you're specifically interested in how medicine transfers back to the US or Canada.
Wonderful. And I will put the Atlantic Bridge link in the chat and we'll share it out in the resources afterwards. This is pretty easy one. I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but there's a question about summer programs for high school students. I know that UCD has a program. Are there any others across the island anyone is aware of?
There are a
We don't.
handful of summer programs and other international institutions. UCD's program is for students that'll be 16 or 17 years old, so usually the summer after sophomore or junior year, which is a nice taster of learning about Irish institutions and what it's like to be a university student in Ireland. So very happy to connect with anyone that's looking for a summer experience for some of the younger students.
Yeah. Queens does offer subject-specific summer programs. However, you do have to be 18 and up. So if you have a student who's potentially interested in maybe doing a short-term experience abroad, summer after senior year, that might be a great fit for them, but unfortunately not available to students under that age of 18.
That's fairly common across the island. There's another question in the chat. It's kind of specific, but about IB students. And I know we've had a lot of IB counselors on the call here. At a high school that follows an IB curriculum, but the school focuses on continuous assessment and high school diploma GPA rather than IB final exams, how do Irish universities assess student eligibility based on their high school GPA or advanced class grades rather than their final IB scores?
So this would definitely be individual to each institution. For UCD, for students that will have both an IB diploma and will receive a US high school diploma, we can essentially review them as kind of two different students, and we will assess them based on their IB predicted scores, and then they could get a conditional offer based on their final IB scores, or we'll consider them as a US high school student and just on their high school GPA. If they maybe took the SAT or the ACT because they thought they needed it for other schools, we'll consider that as well. So they can be considered on merits of either profile and then be admitted to a program based on either one, whichever one benefits them the most. We typically try to default to the US high school grades as the entry requirements because they don't have to wait until July for their final results, but it'll depend on what their predicted scores are and what their grades are.
I know UCC doesn't have a published policy on this at the moment. So right now we're evaluating on a case-by-case basis. But if there's any particular student who's applying from an institution like what you're illustrating, Sarah, please feel free to contact me and we'll work it out with admissions.
I would say same for Queen's University Belfast, case by case basis right now. And I believe it's the same for Ulster, but I may be wrong there. However, if you have students in this scenario who are also looking to apply to other schools in the UK, some schools are a bit more stringent and strict on their entry requirements, having to be, IB test scores and diplomas or AP test scores and a high school diploma. So just kind of, again, do your individual institutional research and reach out to us if you have questions as representatives. We can help you. We can get in contact with admissions and kind of clarify with their team as well, just to kind of figure out what next steps would be for the student.
Thanks, everyone. I know that one's a little bit complicated. Sanders asked if there's a map showing all of the institutions. Yes, and we will include a link to that in the follow-up email. Does anyone review resumes in the application process?
Only for clinical courses. So their experiences will be considered for medicine and vet med, but we wouldn't look at it even if it's submitted for any of their undergraduate courses.
Yep, us as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Question about UCAS personal statement split into 3 questions. Do you read it sequentially as one statement?
Yes, so let me reread this one really quickly. Okay, so wondering if you read it. So I don't actually read the statements or anything like that, but I know with our admissions assessors, typically it depends on the school, but usually you don't have to allot, 1,000 characters to question 1, 2,000 to question 2, and 1,000 to question 3. It's really up to you to use the space and the characters as you want. Typically they like to probably read it from question 1 to 2 to 3. But as long as you're addressing all of the questions, I think it's sufficient.
Thanks, Maddie. I think we clicked through most of the questions. I'm sorry if we missed anybody. We do have a counselor Facebook group where you can always drop questions in. We'll include the link to that in the follow-up as well. So thanks to all who hung on and stayed with us until the end here. And thanks also to our friend Greg at Technological University, the Shannon, who helped us out quite a bit in the chat there. We really appreciate that. So thanks, everyone. We look forward to chatting with you in the future at NECACs and fairs when we come to your cities and to working with your students. And I think the parting message we'd like to leave you with is if you have any questions, your students have questions, we're always happy to have a conversation. So please always feel like you can reach out to us with anything. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Take care.